Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to see so many people joining us live in this webinar. Um, I'm smiling because I'm happy to see you all here, but I do recognize that in all seriousness, this is kind of a heavy topic for some folks, the importance of making room for grief. And we want to invite you to just settle in, take a deep breath, give yourself permission to feel all the feels, but more importantly, just take some time for yourself. If you need to take a break or walk away for a minute or two, feel free to do so. Tonight we have the express honor of being guided by Sarah Van Dyke and Tanya Eichler, clinicians within our AFCCA Family Supports Program. They'll help us take a closer look at grief, what it means, how it shows up in our body, how we can meet it with a whole lot of self-compassion, let's say. Grief is not just something that we get over or we move on from. It's something that we have to move through. And tonight we'll explore some ways that we can do that with a whole lot of gentleness and care. But first, I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from Contrecoeur, Quebec, on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, one of the founding nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This land has never been ceded through treaty or agreement. And while Northern Quebec is governed in part by modern treaties, like the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, much of Southern Quebec, including Contrecoeur specifically, remains without treaty and continues to be the subject of unresolved questions of Indigenous title, jurisdiction, and rights. The Kanien'kehá:ka have maintained an ongoing and living relationship with this territory despite centuries of colonial encroachment and dispossession. And I realize that as we gather in this digital space, we're coming from all over, many different territories within Turtle Island. And I invite you to take a moment just to reflect whose land you're on right now and what are the stories, agreements, and some of the responsibilities connected to that place. I share this acknowledgement with respect and gratitude, certainly honoring the living presence of Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, and our shared responsibility to the land. So, as part of this presentation, we'll have a Q&A sessions at the end, but we do ask you to feel free to comment or leave your questions in the chat as we go along through this session. But we just want to remind you not to provide any identifiable information on any of the children or the families in your care. So as always, this is a safe, non-judgmental space for you. And we thank you for being here with us tonight. So first, I think we're going to start with a little poll here. If we can get this to work, I'm going to launch it right now. And the question we have for you is, have you attended a webinar on grief before? So you can just select your response, yes or no. We're really curious to see your answers here. We're seeing a lot of no's here. Kind of not surprising though, is it? Because it's kind of one of those subjects that's a little bit taboo and people don't really know how to navigate those conversations around grief. So not totally surprising. I'm just going to end this now and we'll share the results. 73% no.
Wow.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're here.
Yes.
Very much.
Perfect. So Tanya, Sarah, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Hello, Tanya. Welcome, everybody. Grief. Such a small word with such amazing weight and impact. Here at Interwoven, we're actually going to take time together tonight, at least an hour and a half. Hopefully you guys have questions to sit with grief, to explore it, question it, and acknowledge its presence in our lives and in the lives of those that we care for and support. The caregivers and the professionals in our networks are deeply compassionate, capable, and committed people. Yet they too encounter waves of grief. Grief is woven through the entire human experience. It's not a problem to solve, but a reality that we live in. Many of the children and youth that we support carry stories marked by grief and loss and trauma. Their grief is not often and always visible, but it's real, and its effects ripple through their present day, and their future. As caregivers, especially kin and adoptive caregivers, we're often called into the trenches with them, to come alongside them, to sit with them, to show them that they're not alone. Personally, the word grief just, it daunts me a lot of the time. It's so daunting. What if I let myself feel grief? Will I ever come up for air? Will I be swallowed by it? Will it take over? I often wonder these things. I might never find my way out. It'll consume me entirely. But in truth, it's actually never happened. I have never been consumed by grief, and I've survived every time, right? Avoidance is a common response when we're uncomfortable, when we're unsure, when we feel alone. But in my experience, grief does find a way to surface. It always has to be witnessed and felt. What if instead of resisting it, we choose to lean in with a sense of confidence, maybe curiosity? What if we give ourselves permission to explore how grief shows up in our bodies and how to respond with compassion instead of fear? Tonight, our hope is that you leave feeling a little bit more prepared, both to navigate your own experience with grief and to support those you love as they inevitably feel grief in their life. Let's approach this time together with openness, gentleness, and courage. I'm going to pass it over to Tanya.
Okay. So the next slide, I think we have another question here. Is this where we're going to do the next one? So we want to talk a little bit about what grief actually is. So this is one of the questions we wanted to see. Have you ever heard of the term unacknowledged grief? So feel free to answer that. Most of us have heard of grief, obviously, and we think of grief as a death most often. It's interesting because actually, as we were preparing this, I was also preparing a funeral. So I had the experience while we were getting this ready of thinking about it in that place of, a loss, but a loss of a life of someone who mattered to me. But grief is actually a little more broad than that. It's really a physical and mental experience that we have when we lose something valuable to us. So it's not just about a death. So, okay, half of you have heard of it. Great. So acknowledged grief is kind of what we think about it when we think about grief. We think about that loss of a person, someone who's close to us, or even somebody who's not close to us. There, we might still have a sense of grief around that. Maybe a pet, something like that. Usually, acknowledged grief is something that most people would recognize as an important loss, and often it includes community. You're gathering together, like I did with my funeral that I was planning. There's a sense of ritual. There's kind of common practices. There's telling stories, remembering, feeling feelings, and there sort of can be a bit of a sense of closure and there's support from other people. You aren't alone in it. And that's really important. And actually it was, I think because I was doing this, I was really thinking about what's going on for me and how is this experience for me and how important all of that grieving in a community was, and how it helped me move through and think about and celebrate the relationship that I'd had and feel the loss and know that I was moving on and still living without that person physically present. Unacknowledged grief is a different thing. It is that thing that happens when we experience a loss that other people don't understand is a loss to us. In fact, it can be unacknowledged by ourselves. So it can be things that are like a loss of a friendship or loss of different kinds of relationships, loss of a dream. even, hoping to get a job, loss of a job, loss of being able to get a job, loss of health, um, loss of traditions, patterns. There's a lot of losses. Loss is really normal in our lives. And if it's something that meant a lot to you, there is a grief experience that goes with loss. Um, the difficulty is when you're not in community and you're doing it by yourself, that's a much more difficult process. Um, and again, we we often don't even notice that we've experienced loss. We sometimes don't even name the losses that we've experienced. Um, and so we cannot realize that our body is experiencing grief. We're experiencing grief, but we're not even noticing that that's what we're experiencing. We're just sometimes angry or really sad, or we don't have energy. And we don't realize it's connected to a loss. One of the other difficulties we have is that our culture, Western culture, doesn't do a good job of grieving. Of we don't we even acknowledge grief. We don't give much space to. We tidy it up. I mean, during COVID, one of the hardest things for a lot of people who lost people during COVID was not even being able to have gatherings of people to celebrate and to go through those rituals that give meaning. Um, and our culture is one of our cultural belief is if we're not happy, something's wrong. And it's like something's bad. You're doing something wrong. Something's wrong with you. And grief is so normal, but we've not left any room for it in our culture. So that becomes really difficult because then where do you go? Who do you be with if you're sad, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you are grieving? Where is the space for you to have to do that with someone? We've really tried to eliminate the discomfort of grief, but what's happened is we've just kind of trapped it all inside. We have this, this overwhelming belief that happiness is the only good thing. So what we really want to do in this is talk about and help people understand that acknowledging all of the losses or trying to notice the losses and what you can do with those losses, how we can be countercultural and not just push into grief, but also push against the culture that says if you're grieving and if you're sad, something's wrong. Because actually, it's not, nothing's wrong. It's just part of life. Your turn, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So I'm actually going to label a lot of this unacknowledged grief tonight here. And there's a lot of power in actually naming it. So adoption and kinship care are often romanticized by our society. Oh, love is enough. That child's lucky to be in your home. These comments often dismiss the grief and loss that are foundational with adoption and kinship arrangements. Adoption and kinship care are deeply bittersweet. Humans are biologically and emotionally wired to raise their own children. When this isn't possible, the resulting loss cuts deep into the human condition. This is why we're human, is to care for others, to rear children. Both for children, both for their families, and both for those that are caring for children after this. The foundation of adoption and kinship is often grief and loss. For birth parents, there's a profound struggle. Their challenges may include generational trauma, systemic racism, poverty, lack of access to supports, substance use challenges, mental health issues, and the impacts that these have for people's capacity to care for themselves and then to keep their children safe. Many families are failed by the very systems that are meant to support them. For adoptive parents, grief can begin with infertility or the loss of the imagined pathway that they would have to parenthood. I'm a woman, you're a man, we have a baby together. When that doesn't happen, it's devastating for people. For kinship caregivers, grief can emerge from a loss of expectation. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, extended family may have envisioned a certain stage of life for themselves. Maybe they're about to retire, maybe they want to travel, maybe they want the freedom. And then they often step into caring for their kin from a place of love, from a place of hoping that their loved one, the child's parent or aunt or uncle, sibling, will recover and be able to return to parenting that child. But when this hope is unmet, the grief is often compounded. The complex balancing act of kinship care. Kinship caregivers often have that tension, deeply caring for a child while also trying to care for an adult family member and wanting them to be well, struggling to maintain or redefine long-standing family relationships under new painful circumstances. Kinship caregivers struggle because the relationship with their kin was well established and occurred even before that child was even born. Struggles with navigating loyalty, love, guilt, and maybe even disappointment. Caregivers that adopt or are in kinship situations often struggle with systemic trauma and are broken supports. They're traumatized by child welfare systems, healthcare and mental health services, legal and educational institutions, and these systems, as I've mentioned, are supposed to be designed to care for them, but are often quite detrimental to people's well-being. Adoption and kin caregivers also struggle on the daily with the ongoing impact that the children that they're caring for experience every day. Caring for children with prenatal substance exposure, complex trauma, FASD, autism, or neurodivergence is extremely difficult every single day. Struggles with sleep, struggles with eating, struggles with transitions, all the things that a lot of our caregivers struggle with every single day. Struggles with lack of services for high needs kiddos. Our province is in crisis right now. Even if they do find services, they often don't feel comfortable because staff are supposed to be providing respite care and they're on their phone. These are things that we've heard from caregivers. The effects of caregiving and caring for kiddos with additional needs on caregivers' health, on their well-being, on their capacity to work, strain on siblings and other family members as they try and build a village for a kiddo that has a lot of needs. The family safety risks related to aggression towards family and caregivers in childhood and adolescence, also known as AFCCA, which many caregivers in this audience experience. It's devastating on the daily and then layered with all the things I've mentioned here. So the grief described here is not like, this is not hypothetical grief. This is grief, lived, collective, and ongoing. So sitting with caregivers in this space can feel devastating, like it will swallow you up. But yet this is the reality of the community that we are here together in. So naming it, which I've literally just done, I hope people heard and could identify with some of the things that I said there. Naming it is the first step to actually validating it. And I'll pass it over to you, Tanya.
I want to just add a quick thing, because I think one of the things, and it's kind of related, one of the things about sharing grief with a community, and I think it's one of the beautiful things that happens in the Interwoven community, is you end up not just feeling sad, but also laughing and telling stories. And it doesn't always have to be heavy and hard, especially when we're not alone. It is one of the most valuable parts of being able to name grief in a community. So I think knowing things like, and it can be really little things like, My
Yeah.
Christmas, I always thought we would have this lovely family Christmas, and my family Christmas looks horrible and scary, and we can't wrap presents because kids get too overwhelmed, and all of the losses, or we can't spend Christmas together because everyone can't be in the same room. Those are the little losses that, well, they're big losses, but that we don't always recognize as losses that we need to grieve. But when you're in a community and there's other people that have those same things, the relief is huge. It's a huge, huge piece. Um, and because kinship and adoption are not typical, not unusual at all, but they're not typical, it really matters to have and find that community that you can share this stuff with. Let's go for the next one.
And we do have a question before we talk about a physical experience of grief and how that manifests. How can you tell you're experiencing grief? Are there certain telltale signs? We have a list of some, and if there are other manifestations of grief, we would love to hear them in the comment section. Could everybody see the poll? Oh, just populating for me now. Thank you for all your responses. We'll share the results in just one moment. Give everybody some time to respond.
So valuable to start noticing how grief feels like, and it can feel like lots of these things or specific things. Yeah.
And multiple things in 3 minutes.
We're seeing everything across the board, so I'm just going to share the results now so you can see.
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at how
Withdrawing.
big withdrawing. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That is
And
so
it's
interesting.
isolating.
Yeah. That makes so much sense too, because and I think that sits with or fits with that thing about how our society doesn't feel comfortable with grief.
Yeah.
We don't feel like when we are grieving, I remember when I lost my father when I was quite young, and I remember feeling like I couldn't, people didn't want me around almost because I felt sad.
Yeah.
And I also didn't want to necessarily be around people because I didn't want to bring them down. Again, it's that piece of why it really matters to find your community. We aren't really meant to grieve by ourselves. Um, so I know that I believe there is a room somewhere with a whole bunch of people in it listening to this all together, and we are so thrilled about that. But this is such an important conversation to have as often as possible with people who get it and where you feel safe. So, um, grief is, we often think grief is in our minds, but grief is actually a physical experience. It is very much a body experience. And it's interesting because, again, this person that I lost recently, it was an expected loss. There was a progression. It wasn't an untimely loss. Um, and when I heard that that person had passed, I felt it in my gut. There was like it hit me, which sort of took me by surprise. And there are other times when that can happen, even anniversaries of grief, anniversaries of loss, which is really important to consider with our kiddos because so many of our kiddos had these huge losses at times when they couldn't make meaning of it, but their bodies experienced it and feel it. And you probably notice at anniversary times that there are big behaviors because that can be just about their grief really rearing up and reminding them there. And what that is, so this gonna get myself organized here. Grief it's in our body. Actually, about 80% of the experience is our body. Only about 20% of it happens in our mind. Um, because we experience loss as a threat. A loss is ultimately it's a loss of control. Which again is why some of our kiddos get real controlling when they're dysregulated. Um, we all of us feel threatened by a loss of control, and any kind of loss is a loss of control on some level. So our nervous system gets triggered into having a threat response. And there are kind of two levels of those response. There's a level that's that fight or flight level. And then there's also the level that's the overwhelm level. The fight or flight can feel like anxiety, the overwhelm, and it's why often grief feels like depression. Um, that overwhelm feeling, it is often an accumulation of a lot of griefs, or over time grief not dealt with and stress not dealt with can get to that overwhelmed place, and that's the one that feels like that shutdown or depression. Again, because society's expectation is for us to be goal oriented and successful and productive and happy, um, grief is inconvenient. It makes us inefficient. um, it makes it difficult to be organized. It's hard to think. And that is another reason why it can be so difficult to actually deal with. We can often try to pretend it's not there and push through it, but there's a cost when we do that. It also just doesn't feel good. When we start to feel grief, it can hurt, physically hurt. Um, it the I often have caregivers say, and I felt this, I feel like I can feel it there, but I feel like if I give into it, it's going to take me like a tidal wave and I'm going to be wiped out. And that there's a lot of fear behind that. We're afraid to let ourselves feel and sit with grief. Um, it's funny because I even noticed as we were preparing for this, I was kind of avoiding all day thinking about what I was going to say and thinking about it. And it's because even talking about grief, we feel it. We feel it just talking about it. And I kind of wanted to avoid feeling it. Um, but because it is a physical experience, if we don't consider it and process it and move through it, and there's no, I want to get away from the myth that you get over grief, because we don't actually get over grief. We learn to live with it, and it can get quieter. But if we ignore it and just stomp it down, what happens is it kind of erupts in different ways. We can't continue to, and you probably know that when we've got a lot of it in our body, when we're feeling it a lot, again, we can't think properly. We might be more reactive. Um, we might just, some people will just suddenly burst into tears. There's a name for that, and I can't remember what the name for it is, but that's okay. If you know it, you know it. But sometimes there's just it erupts out because we can only keep that pressure down. But even trying to keep the pressure down is really hard on our bodies. So it's kind of why we really wanted to talk about this, because in some ways, I think what I realized when I was thinking about grief is, allowing myself to grieve is a way of honoring what I loved. And whenever I'm honoring what I loved, I'm actually kind of honoring myself in some ways. It's because every time I'm loving, it's one of the better parts of me. So even loving a tradition that I've lost, or a family relationship that's been distanced, or my sense of self, whenever I can honor that loss, I'm honoring the best of myself. And that's a way of looking after me. But I'm also, when I'm actually allowing myself to feel some of the grief and move through it, I'm physically allowing myself to let some of that go. And that is a relief to my body, and helps me not be overwhelmed and overtaken and beat up by grief, because it can kind of feel like it's beating us up sometimes. So it's kind of a form of self-care. I remember realizing, I said earlier, I lost my father young, and it's been a long time. It's been 30 years. And but he'll come to mind, and now I've learned to just when I think of him, to just sit and think of him for a moment, and to notice my feelings and let it be and let it go through. And I feel stronger and better and more whole when I can sit with it and it passes. It will pass. It doesn't stay stuck. It's always, all feelings are temporary. More temporary, the less we try to stomp them down and pretend they don't exist. Let's go for Sarah now.
I actually have something to contribute. I remember the overwhelming sense of guilt and shame that came along with grief, that I couldn't feel joy in the same way, that it was dishonoring, that having lost my cousin at such a young age, that I felt bad that I had survived and that I was enjoying my life. And for a long time, my mom said, "Why aren't you smiling? Why aren't you your giggly self?" And I felt like it was shameful to feel joy.
Yeah.
Like you were disrespecting the memory.
Yeah.
Aw,
Very strong feelings and
Yeah.
emotions.
for sharing that. So we're going to talk about moving through grief with self-compassion. So I'm going to slowly say this. All grief is valid. All grief is real. All grief is valid. All grief is real. There's no hierarchy of grief. There's no need to measure it. There's no need to compare it to others. What we feel in the face when we face loss or change and uncertainty deserves acknowledgement. All of it. Oh, it's been so long since I lost this person, I shouldn't be. There's no shoulds. Shoulds are usually shame-based. So what if we choose to walk with grief alongside grief with self-compassion and care? So self-compassion really invites us to pause, or even better, to stop constantly self-judging and self-evaluating our feelings. It teaches us to maybe treat ourselves with the same kindness and patience that we treat other people. When we label grief or really any feeling as good or bad, it places like a moral value on a feeling. Feelings are feelings. They are what they are. But grief is not a moral failure. It's a natural response, as Tanya mentioned, to love, to loss, and to loss of connection often. And it's also part of what it means to be human. Across cultures and generations, grief is a universal human experience. So when we're grieving, sometimes, oh, nobody's ever felt like this. Oh, no, only one. No. Generations, every culture feels grief. And when we can acknowledge that, that's when we actually might feel close to all humans, because we all experience this. But again, across cultures, across generations, people have learned to acknowledge grief and to actually thrive as we walk with grief. And that's part of what we can do when we share our grief with our community, especially like we're doing tonight, right? So I do want to talk about this community, which I'm newish to, but what I've noticed is deep commitment, thoughtful care, openness to growth, and moments of radical acceptance. So these strengths are evident in how we show up for each other, how we show up for our children, how we show up for everybody in our life. So maybe we can offer this same compassion to ourselves that we so generously offer to other people. What if we give ourselves permission to grieve, to rest, and to heal without judgment? And I have to say, this one is so hard for me, because I'm often wanting to know why do I feel this way? But the why is because we've lost something, and because we love something and we had connection with it. So I'm really trying to challenge myself, like the why doesn't really matter as much as actually feeling the feelings. Tanya and I are big fans of self-compassion.
Well, and I think I've learned a lot about we we have a critical culture. And so, I mean, it's interesting because Sally, even the story that you said, it really describes that piece of, even implying why aren't you smiling as much
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
statement of judgment. You should be smiling. You should be your own self. And even if it wasn't meant that way, it's easy to take it that way when I don't feel like smiling. And also the self-judgment of, oh, I shouldn't be happy. I should be sad, right? I've lost something. And I think we also, what I see in our community is a lot of self-judgment around, I don't think I feel like I can't accomplish stuff. I feel like I just can't get stuff done. I don't feel like I can't fill out those forms. Um, I can't do another thing. I don't, and so much self-judgment and shame around that. And I guess the flip to self-compassion is going, I'm dealing with a lot. Look at all of the losses and wow, this is hard. This is hard. This is a lot. And giving ourselves space. I think in some of the more practical ways, like I think we wanted to really talk about what can I actually do to become unstuck, because I don't think anyone I know doesn't stuff their grief at some point. And it's okay. We can't just it's actually not okay to just go bleeding grief all over the place, right? That wouldn't actually be all right. We do still have jobs. We do still have to parent. We have to still function. So one of the things we can do is actually give ourselves small spaces to grieve or to sit with it, to be curious with ourselves. And that is a kind of self-compassion, to actually say, I'm going to spend 15 minutes tonight and just sit and think, what are my losses? What are some of them? Maybe I can name a couple of the losses and see, and very practically sit down, maybe with a piece of paper and think, because they'll come to mind. And we are capable of actually um, kind of holding a part, beginning and stopping the grief. And it's okay to do that. So it's not, I'll give you a couple of really cool tips around how to not let the tidal wave actually take you out. It might feel huge sitting with it, sitting with for in adoption, in the community, in adoption and kinship, in the community, what Sarah was describing, the stories around adoption, they all begin with loss. They all begin with trauma. We have a lot of heartache and sadness and hard stories, and stories that where there's no simple answer and no end in sight. Things aren't just going to get better. And that's the reality. So that's hard. That's hard. And even knowing this is not going to get better is a loss. Um, but being able to sit and go, what losses do I notice from today? Losses of what I thought I was going to be able to do and I couldn't do. Maybe my child wasn't invited to a party. Maybe I see they're struggling in school and the teachers are not getting it. The system's letting me down again. Maybe someone else was judgmental to me. Maybe I was judgmental to myself. My spouse and I are struggling because we see this differently and we're really having a hard time with it. And there's a lot of stress in our marriage and in our relationship. Maybe my home has holes in the walls. I never dreamed I would live in a home where there were holes in the walls. I never dreamed I would live in a home where I had to lock up medication or lock up things or where I would have to call the police. We deal with a lot of that in our community. And those are losses, loss of peace in your home. A loss of, I want to go in my home because that's where I relax. A loss in the AFCCA world, a loss of safety in your home is a huge loss. a loss of what your family. So sitting and actually naming that, and then what I would encourage people to do is name the loss and then sit with what, if you can, with one at a time, and just think about what that loss has actually meant to you. And as you feel, it will bring up emotion, and just notice it. Where is that emotion? What is that emotion in your body? Where is it? Is it in your gut? Is it in your chest? Do you feel it here? Where are you holding that and storing that inside? Because we do. And just sit with it and notice it. And if you feel like you need to move, move. Your body will actually tell you what it needs to do if you actually take a moment, take 10 minutes and listen to it. It'll tell you what it wants. Does it need to be held? You can actually hold on to yourself. Putting hands on your chest, holding your arms, doing something like this is very soothing to yourself. If you have to do this alone, there are ways you can do it. If tears come, we really like to choke down tears because they hurt, they're uncomfortable. A lot of us were told not to cry. But crying is actually our body's way of releasing some of the grief. It's really useful. Don't worry if you can't cry, that's okay. But if you feel like crying, some people get afraid of crying because they feel like if I start, I'm not going to be able to stop. So there's actually a trick. I'm going to give you a trick. Once you start, if you start to cry, you let yourself and you're able to start, then shift your thinking from what you're crying about to what's happening. What's the physical sensation? Notice the tears gathering in your eyes. Notice your nose getting stuffing, the burning in your throat. Just notice the sensation. And as you cry, it will probably last 1 to 2 minutes and you will stop crying naturally. But you will also feel a relief at the end. It actually helps you move through a cycle of grief, of stress, releasing some of that from your body. There's relief. You can take a breath and you'll know it's okay. If you feel like you have the time to kind of sit with the feeling again, and it might bring up tears again, just do the same thing. Shift back to what's that sensation? Oh, I can feel it happening again. I feel the buildup in my chest. I can feel that. So shift to the physical feeling and you will cry and you will stop quite quickly. And I have had people try this. It does work. Um, so and it's super effective for getting some of that stuff that's trapped inside of us out. Um, it's really important to do things that are symbolic of what well, okay, I actually want to say we can do this alone, but anytime you can be, again, in community with other people who get it, do that. And if you can say, I just need 5 minutes just to feel the feels, and I don't need you to fix it. I just need to feel it. I just need to talk about how hard this is. And there's no fixing it, and I know there's no fixing it, but I just need it to be witnessed. Sorry, I'm a therapist, so we talk like that. I know normal people don't talk like that.
But you bring up
But
a great point, right? Because I think oftentimes we don't even have the words for our own grief. And then we see those around us that can see that we're struggling and they don't know how to help. And we
yeah,
don't even know what we need to get help. So how do we navigate those dynamics of close relationships when we're in it?
yeah.
And you know,
And I think that thing, if you can say to someone, I just need to say this out loud and I need you to see it. I don't need you to fix anything. That's really important because those people, there's a lot, again, we want to make people happy. We think happiness is the goal. And actually, happiness is not the goal here. Feeling it is the goal. Feeling it, being witnessed, not being alone, that's a goal. That moves us through and gets us out the other side of just some of it. Let's face it, in the adoption world, there's so many layers of grief. It's a lifetime of, but again, that's normal. Life is full of losses. So learning how to go and actually honor ourselves and our grief and our losses is part of living. I recently heard or read, we often try to tamp down the feelings that we don't like the sadness, the anger, all of those sorts of feelings, but we don't actually get to choose which feelings we shut down. We either shut down all of them or we're tamping all of them down. So that means if we're shutting down our grief and our sadness, we're also shutting down our joy. We're shutting down our ability to celebrate. So in order to really honor our life and our actual experience, we kind of need to feel all of the things. And that's the whole human living experience. We're not meant to be happy all the time. We're meant to feel a lot of different things. And that is life. Joy is joyful because sadness is a contrast. And it's such a great way to honor. And I think it also honors our kids because they also experience a great deal of grief. They have had massive losses and they continue to experience massive losses. So whenever we as adults can have room and experience grief and move through grief with some safety for ourselves, we're also opening that up for our kids to learn how to do too. And that's really powerful because so many of our kids experience loss before they have memory, and so they don't have a clue what's going on in their bodies. So those are really, really important. I'm just thinking about some of the other, I'm looking at my notes to see if there's things. I think the most important thing is just if you can allow yourself just those few minutes every so often to notice your grief and feel it, is to really listen to what do I need right now? Like, do I need to move? Do I need to put something, snuggle with my dog? Do I need a certain kind of music? Um, Breathing is really valuable, right? So breathing and some of us have been told to breathe too often, so that can be stressful. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't tell your children to breathe because they do breathe, but don't. I have so many kids that I've seen that when I say, would you like to try to breathe? And they're so frustrated because so many people have seen them get angry and told them to breathe that it feels like we're controlling them. So if we can learn how to breathe some of our stress, that's really useful. So breathing through stress, one of the most effective breaths is 2 sharp inhales and a long exhale. So really exhaling that stress and grief from our body. Um, notice where we're holding all of the heavy. Every so often, once in a very blue moon, I get to go for a massage. And I often say when the masseuse hits those really hard knots, I say that's where I hold the sadness. Or that's where I hold my sad stories because I think I do. I think I hold them in certain parts of my body. Um, and yeah, moving, rhythmic movement, what we call bilateral movement, which is using both sides of your body in rhythm. So walking, running, dancing, riding a bike, those sorts of things are really effective for, again, stress and grief and helping get some of that worked out of your body. And again, notice as you're doing that, what are your feelings? If you're feeling that really shut down, foggy kind of depression, a lot of exercise could actually make it harder. That might be where you need more comfort. If you're feeling the stressed kind of, anxious kind of grief feelings, that might be where you need movement. So those can really noticing the difference in those is good. I would love if people ask questions around any of this stuff.
I
'Cause
actually
we're
have a
coming-
question about numbness. What happens when you know you're so beyond feeling, and this is the best way for me to explain this sensation, but you're so beyond emotion that you become numb. You know, that numbness where you're like, I should be feeling something right now, but you're either in shock or you're in some sort of emotional state. What do we do in those instances?
I think we'd be really, really gentle with ourselves. I
Mm.
love the fact that you just said, I should be feeling something, because that's
Mm.
such a non-compassionate, self-compassionate statement.
Right,
It's right.
right.
You can
Yeah,
hear
we're
that.
conditioned
That.
like culturally
Yeah.
that you need to feel something in this moment. It's not acceptable to feel numb, but yeah.
But the
And I
numbness
think
is all you can handle at that time. Your body is keeping you safe
Mm.
in that moment. And numbness is actually keeping the pain away, frankly, literally.
Like a self-preservation, if you will.
Yeah, your body knows what to do, and it's been keeping you alive for all your years. But
Mm.
yeah.
we worry, right? Oh, I should feel something. I should. But there is no should. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I've learned that numbness is that shutdown, and I when I talk to people, I say, treat yourself as if you're sick. If you had the flu, what would you do? You'd wrap yourself up, you would nap, you'd eat healthy foods, you drink water, you do the things that are taking care of you, because that's really you're so overwhelmed that you just need to be, and again, you need people to take care of you. It's hard for us to ask for help. It's really hard. It's not very socially acceptable. But if you have any kind of community and you can go, I'm having a really hard day, would you be able to name anything someone else could do for you? Um, because the reality is most people like to help, but they don't know what to do. So when we can name anything that could be useful, that's pretty powerful. And I honestly wish we would all get better at asking for help, because we need to do better at becoming community. We have lost our ability to do community. And when I was a child, it was not a big deal to call the neighbor and say, I need eggs or I need sugar. And I don't even know my neighbors anymore. And I think we need to, I would wish we could get back to, man, I really need some help today.
That's,
Because we all know we'd love to help if we could.
yeah,
So I think
definitely.
people, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's hard though, isn't it? It's hard. And you can see that they recognize the pain that you're dealing with. And there's a level of awkwardness with some, right? And it's
Mhm.
hard to break that barrier. And, you know, I think there's a little bit of a fear of rejection too, of being vulnerable, because dealing with emotions is vulnerable. Speaking about your emotions is vulnerable.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is difficult to overcome.
Well, and again, when you add that unacknowledged grief into it, right? When other people don't realize, or they think, well, I even remember, I lost my father young, and and I remember someone saying, you should be over it by now.
Oof.
Yeah. People
Ouch.
can be, yeah, and that's a pretty big loss of, so I think when we think about all of those subtle little losses that we have, and people really not understanding that that means a lot to
Oh
us, that
yeah.
actually those are all, like I think of things getting broken in our home that meant a lot to us, or so many little things that one of the biggest ones is those dreams, loss of dream, a dream of what I thought what I wanted my family to look like, what I expected Christmas to feel like, what
Mm.
things I wanted to do as a mom or as a dad or as a caregiver, how those are huge. And being able to name, wow, this is what I wanted, and my reality doesn't resemble that. That's a massive loss. And again, this is a good community to name and talk about that with, because this is the community that understands it.
There's a beauty with that. There's a beauty in that, I should say.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of questions. We asked our
Ooh.
community ahead of time, so we have a couple questions here. I think they're great. How do I know if what I'm experiencing is grief versus something else like stress or depression? It's a good one, right?
I would say, and Sarah, you too, but I would say yes and yes. I mean, because grief is stressful and it can feel like depression. And I don't know if you can name a loss and identify a loss and honor it and feel it, you're going to move through grief. We're pretty afraid of titles like depression. And that's a tough label, but depression is often not just is too much stress over too much time with not enough support and not enough relief. And grief can be part of that. So one of the ways, in some ways, of treating depression can be acknowledging and feeling and being in community with and doing all of the things we need to manage or to work on our own grief.
And I would also add, if you're feeling like you're a burden, like you don't want to reach out, like, oh, I don't want to bother them. If you're finding that those feelings are surfacing for you, you might want to seek some support from your family. Because sometimes we don't want to reach out and we feel like a burden because the grief is so overwhelming. So be mindful of those feelings as well when you don't want to reach out. Yeah.
I'm talking about
And
community.
don't be afraid. Oh, sorry. You go.
No, please, Tanya, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, don't be afraid to talk, to also reach out to a therapist, because this is one of those things that most mental health practitioners have some training in grief. But definitely, if you know your life is full of loss, definitely look for a therapist that knows about grief. If your loss is around adoption and or kinship, it's great if you can find a therapist that has some knowledge of those things.
We were talking about leaning on our community, and we just have a question here from a participant. Do you have suggestions on how to build community? That's hard, isn't it?
Well, it is because our society is so bad at it. I mean, our Western civilization has gotten this nuclear family concept, and we've isolated ourselves, and it's not useful. So how to build community? I mean, again, well, if you're part of the Interwoven community, we do a lot of online stuff, and we're willing to match. We do a lot of groups and a lot of talking, and it's not the same as having a neighbor. But it's something, and I know it's really powerful for a lot of our caregivers. But otherwise, I think it depends on where you live. But any sort of and it's funny because this is something that I struggle with because I've just moved into a new community, and I think I was really looking for. I grew up in the country and I moved back into the country, and I expected it to feel like it did when I was a kid, and it doesn't feel like it.
Doesn't it?
No, people are different than they used to be. We're all on our phones and out of community. So, but I think at least start with online community.
Yeah,
You
agreed.
can find people with things that are in common in that way. And then if there's any in-person things that you can find, that's really important. But vulnerability, like Sarah said, right? Learning how to be vulnerable is really important. I think Sarah said that, or Sally. I'm not sure which one of you said it.
I think we both touched on that. We have another question as well. What's the difference between healthy grieving and being stuck in grief?
I think we all get stuck in grief sometimes. I mean, And that's okay. I would, sorry, I keep starting this, but Sarah, if you have something to say, I don't want to monopolize. I
Go
think
ahead.
to me the whole healthy grieving is just allowing yourself to feel it when you can.
Mm,
And that's it. But sometimes we have so many griefs, they start to pile up, or we don't have time. But it does get stuck sometimes, and that's not unhealthy. It's just life. It's just real. So again, try to have some self-compassion around the stuck bit. But I think we're stuck when we have that numbness and we're having a hard time feeling. So again, when we're
yeah.
stuck, being really gentle, just being more self-compassionate, leaning more into an understanding community is probably the best way to become unstuck.
Mm,
And personally, I find that if I actually put a bit of a limit on my grief, it sounds ridiculous, but for
mm.
example, I'm allowed to cry in the car. I put on my big sunglasses, I listen to
Oh,
music, and I can cry to or fro wherever I'm driving. You know, I have 3 teenagers. Sometimes I literally felt like I didn't have time to let the grief out. And again, I felt like it would overwhelm me. So it's ridiculous, but it works. I'm going to allow myself to cry in the shower. I'm going to allow myself to cry on my bike ride. I don't know for me, but sometimes, but often crying while moving was always a good combo, like driving or biking or even in the shower. Letting out that little bit of grief, but again, I also have experienced moments where I just literally couldn't breathe. Thankfully, they moved over time, but there was moments where I literally didn't think I would survive, but I did. We do. That's the other piece around our community here at Interwoven. We have experienced so much, and we're here, and many of us are thriving. Many of us are thriving for a little bit of the day, some of the day, most of the day, right? Um, yeah, it's good question.
And it's not linear, right? Like it comes and goes in waves. And
Mhm.
even before, when we were just having a conversation, just the three of us, and I had mentioned how I just suddenly had an overwhelming feeling of grief 18 years after losing somebody. It was intense, and I wasn't expecting that, right? You expect it to happen on the early stages, right when you lose the person. You don't expect it to hit you so many years after the fact. So sometimes we even are surprised by the emotions and the timing.
Yeah,
And
and
it's important. Oh, sorry, you go, Sarah.
sorry, as I care for my own children who are now almost 16, 18, and almost 20, as they developmentally reach different milestones and grieve, I also grieve different things that I never would have imagined grieving as a younger parent or as a parent of a school age person. So even the grief changes, it morphs, it changes, it even grows as my kiddos grow and as my capacity for them to understand grows. There's more grief, different grief. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed we didn't we I don't think we consciously decided not to, but we haven't really talked about what are classically called the stages of grief. And I think that there's a usefulness to understanding what they call the stages of grief, only that in that it recognizes grief feels like a lot of different things. But the problem with the concept of the stages of grief is it suggests that linear thing. You're going to feel this and then this and then this and then and it's nice to be familiar with what those stages are called, because you can start to go, oh, that might be what's going on here, right? I'm in the anger stage. I'm in the, the sadness, all of the different things. But I love that there's a diagram that you think grief is going to be like this, but it's actually like this. It's one of those, yeah, and that's it. And the other thing that's really important is I remember learning that this was actually when I was doing my training, talking a bit about grief and and about anniversaries of the loss of my father. And I said, I feel like I'm back there. But when we have I call it now an echo of the grief, because we're not back there, we're feeling it, and it's an echo of it. It's a reminder of it. Our body is reminded of for something. Someone was saying, oh, I was talking to someone about grief today, and they were saying a physical experience reminded them of a great loss, and it just took them right back. But we're not back there. We have this way of thinking, oh no, I'm back at the beginning again. We're not back at the beginning again. We're where we are, feeling a different part of the grief at a different time. And we don't exactly stop grieving, but we can make meaning. We can come to that. Acceptance is a lovely stage to get to sometimes.
Oh,
We can get to acceptance
what pisses me off.
and then still feel the grief again. Sorry, was that
Yeah.
Sarah?
I don't like that one. It pisses me off because I don't think it's attainable acceptance.
Mm.
I think it's more about meaning making. And I've heard that grief be described as like a rock, and you put the rock in your pocket and it's so heavy to start with. It's so heavy. You don't even know how you can walk. But then over time, you actually become stronger. So the rock is still there, but you're stronger and you're able to sort of manage it and maneuver it a little bit better because your legs are stronger, your body's stronger. So I don't know if this acceptance ever really.
Well, acceptance isn't about I think the reason it becomes confusing is because some people think of acceptance as the end of grief. But I think we accept parts of things at different times. Acceptance is one of the feelings that happens interspersed with sadness and anger and all of those other things. And so it's that piece of, I think we feel like when we get to sort of a feeling of, oh, okay, I've kind of accepted this. And then we feel like a deep sadness. We think, oh, I'm failing this grief thing.
Yeah, like you're reverting, like you're slipping
Yeah.
back into something else.
And
Definitely.
that's where it's not, that's our mistaken belief of how grief is supposed to work.
Mm.
No, we just are feeling another part of the grief, or it's like we're seeing the elephant on a different side. It's just it's all the feelings in different moments and different, and none of them are dangerous and none of them are permanent. Feelings are all information and they're all temporary.
Mm.
And the more they become more temporary, the more we lean into them and let them, and more stuck, the more we avoid them and stomp them down. So
Mm.
Can I
That's
just
great.
share one more thing, sorry? One more thing.
Please.
So today is my mom's 12-year death anniversary.
Mm.
So
Sorry.
my mom passed away 12 years ago today. So my mom was a registered nurse and she worked in palliative care for 35 years. So she was in the trenches of grief. And I know that she would be so proud of us tonight for all getting together and talking about such a uncomfortable topic. She would just be so proud of us. And that's, I'm thinking, oh, this year feels very different for me than often my mom's death anniversary feels.
mm.
Yeah, I've actually spent the day in the trenches, Tanya. I've been thinking about this all day. So let's just say I'll have a very good sleep tonight.
It's such a universal experience, though, isn't it? Like we all go through it. None of us
Yeah,
come out of
we
this
don't get to avoid it.
unscathed. Yeah, very much.
I think the only way we can avoid grief is by not caring about anything. And no one,
Mm.
I don't want to live that way.
No. Don't sign me up for that.
No,
That doesn't
love
sound
that.
like a life. Yeah.
No. Yeah. With great love comes great loss, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Looks like there's no other questions. Let me just take the Q&A section. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Sarah and Tanya, for walking us through this lovely session. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in live and whoever's watching the recording after the fact. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. We hope you have a good day, good evening. And we hope that you join us for some of our other content and other webinars as well. So bye. Thank you.
Please take good care of yourselves.
Yes.